Everyone, and welcome. Today, we're talking about some truly brilliant people who had these world-changing ideas, but at first, everybody thought they were nuts. I mean, they were ridiculed, dismissed, and called downright crazy. These were visionaries who just saw the world a little differently, way before anyone else was ready to believe them. Let's get into it.
You've probably heard that question before, right? It really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. When a new idea comes along that completely shatters everything we think we know, our first instinct is usually to push it away, to just label it as absurd or impossible. But is that always the right move?
And that's really the key. So often, the only thing separating madness from genius is time. The stories we're about to explore, they all show how today's crazy idea can become tomorrow's common sense. It's this wild pattern of ridicule followed eventually by vindication. And it tells us something really important about how uncomfortable progress can be.
Okay, for our first story, I want you to picture this. We're in Vienna, it's the 1840s, and we're at the General Hospital. Now, this place was supposed to be the best of the best, but it had a terrifying secret. For women giving birth, walking into one of its maternity wards was basically a death sentence because of this horrible mystery illness called childbed fever.
So back then, the leading theory for how disease spread was something called miasma, basically the idea that it was all because of bad smells or foul air. But this one young doctor, Ignaz Semmelweis, he wasn't buying it. He noticed something really strange. The death rate for new mothers was way higher in the ward run by doctors, who, by the way, often came straight from performing autopsies, than it was in the midwives' ward. This led him to a completely shocking idea. The doctors themselves were carrying what he called cadaverous particles from dead bodies to living patients on their unwashed hands.
So in 1847, Semmelweis made a new rule. Every doctor had to wash their hands in a chlorine solution. And the results? They were absolutely staggering. I mean, this chart says it all. The death rate in the doctor's ward went from a horrifying 18% all the way down to just 3%. It was a miracle. The numbers were right there in black and white. He was literally saving lives.
You'd think they would have thrown him a parade, right? Nope, not even close. Instead of being hailed as a hero, he was met with pure hostility. The established doctors were insulted. I mean, how dare he suggest that these respected gentlemen of science, were the ones causing all the deaths? They took it as a personal attack on their status, on their cleanliness. And since germ theory wasn't a thing yet, they just couldn't wrap their heads around it, so they dismissed his data as a fluke.
And it's just heartbreaking when you look at how things played out for him. His career was ruined, he got forced out of Vienna, and his mental health just collapsed as he had to watch people keep dying from something he knew how to prevent. The irony is just gut-wrenching. He ended up in an asylum in 1865 and died just years before Louis Pasteur's work on germs proved that he had been right all along.
All right, let's jump forward a bit for our next story, because this pattern just keeps showing up. We're in the early 20th century now, and we're going to meet Alfred Wegener. He was a German meteorologist, a weatherman. He wasn't even a geologist, which, well, that's going to be important in a minute. But he was about to propose an idea so huge, it would threaten to bring the whole field of geology crashing down.
Okay, so at the time, if there was one thing every single geologist on the planet knew for a fact, it was this: the continents don't move. They're fixed. They've always been right where they are now. End of story. But Wegener, he looked at a world map and saw something totally different. He suggested that, millions of years ago, all the continents were actually smashed together into one giant supercontinent he called Pangaea, and they'd been drifting apart ever since.
And listen, this wasn't some wild guess. The guy was a serious scientist, and he brought the receipts. He was like, first off, just look at a map. South America and Africa fit together like a puzzle. Then he showed how fossils of the exact same ancient reptiles were being found on totally different continents, separated by thousands of miles of ocean. And on top of that, he found identical rock layers and mountain chains that looked like they were just sliced in half by the Atlantic Ocean.
So what did the experts think of all this compelling evidence? Oh, they hated it. Hated it. They basically laughed him out of the room. They called him an outsider, just a weatherman who didn't know what he was talking about. This quote here from a prominent British geologist pretty much sums it up. Utter damned rot. They thought his idea was a complete fantasy.
And here's where the story gets tragically familiar, right? Just like Semmelweis, Wegener died long before anyone admitted he was right. He actually died on an expedition in Greenland in 1930, and his theory was still a total joke in the scientific community. The biggest problem was he couldn't explain how. Like, what force could possibly be powerful enough to move an entire continent? It took another 30 years and the discovery of plate tectonics in the 1960s for science to finally figure it out and prove Wegener's incredible vision was right all along.
For our last story, we're coming into much more recent history.
the 1980s. This is the amazing story of Barry Marshall, an Australian doctor who had a literal gut feeling about what really causes stomach ulcers and took one of the most extreme, dangerous steps you can possibly imagine to prove he was right.
So for pretty much forever, if you got a stomach ulcer, your doctor told you the same thing. You're too stressed out, stop eating spicy food. Treatment was all about managing it, not curing it. But Marshall and his partner, Robin Warren, they kept noticing this tiny spiral-shaped bacteria in stomach samples from their ulcer patients. So they proposed a completely different idea. Ulcers aren't caused by your lifestyle, they're caused by a bacterial infection. And, surprise, surprise, the experts thought they were nuts. The idea was considered totally ridiculous. Every textbook said that the human stomach is basically a vat of acid, and there was no way any bacteria could possibly survive in there. When Marshall would present his research, people would just roll their eyes. Nobody was taking this crazy idea seriously.
So what does Marshall do? This is the best part of the story. He gets so fed up with being ignored, he decides, fine, I'll be the guinea pig. He goes into his lab, cooks up a batch of this H. pylori bacteria in a broth, and then he drinks the whole thing. And sure enough, a few days later, he gets violently ill with gastritis, which is the first step to getting an ulcer. And then he just took a simple course of antibiotics and cured himself. He became his own living proof.
Now, you'd think that would be the end of it, right? But it still took a while for people to finally come around. But the evidence was just undeniable. And finally, in 2005, Barry Marshall and Robin Warren got the ultimate last laugh. They were awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine. Their crazy idea completely changed everything we know about stomach ulcers and has helped millions of people.
So, okay, let's pull back for a second. We've got the hand washer, the continent mover, and the guy who drank bacteria. 3 totally different people, different times, different fields. But you're starting to see the pattern here, right? There's a clear blueprint for how these kinds of revolutionary ideas seem to work their way into the world.
It's like a script that plays out over and over. It all starts when someone notices something that just doesn't fit with what everyone knows to be true. That leads to a brand new, radical theory. Then, almost without fail, the establishment, the experts, they push back. They ridicule it. But eventually, the evidence just becomes too much to ignore. And decades later, the theory is proven right. The person once called a madman is now called a visionary.
And this is why these stories are so important. They're not just fun history facts. They're a powerful reminder that real, game-changing progress, well, it's almost never easy or comfortable. It forces us to question things we thought were settled, and, that can be a really hard thing to do.
Which leaves us with one last, kinda challenging question to chew on. When you think about Semmelweis and his clean hands, or Wegener and his moving continents, it makes you wonder, whose crazy idea are we all dismissing right now? What revolutionary concept are we laughing at today that maybe 50 years from now people will look back on and think was completely obvious? It's definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for watching.